Because a lot of times we get to these points and we're like, oh my God, how am I gonna make it? When you get to that final hour, it's very easy to be like, oh my gosh, when is it gonna happen? When's it gonna happen? And like, there's still more time for God to work. Today's video is for anyone who is in that final hour. So meaning like, you've been waiting for a miracle, you've been praying for a miracle, you've been doing all the work, and you're getting right down to that last, basically, if the miracle doesn't come in, it's over for you, it's a wrap. This video is for you, keep it locked. Yo, it's your girl Janice AG. Welcome back to my world where we are documenting the process of going from zero to hero to live a life of maximum fulfillment. We're back with another heart to heart. I know it's been a minute. Today's video is for anyone who is in that final hour. So meaning like you've been waiting for a miracle, you've been praying for a miracle, you've been doing all your manifestations, you've been doing all the work, and you're getting right down to that last, basically, if the miracle doesn't come in, it's over for you, it's a wrap. This video is for you. I'm gonna be walking you through some activities and giving you some context with stories that should help, at the very least, get your mind right and keep your mind frame in the space to receive the miracle. Okay, so first things first, I just wanna let you know, I know that usually my heart-to-hearts are just completely off the top. This one is going to be off the top, but I do have this notebook because there's some specific things that I want to make sure that I hit on and that I don't go on too long of tangents. And we are going to be doing some activities today, so it probably makes sense for you to have a pen and paper as well. And for those of you that rock with the Bible, a Bible could be helpful, but you might not need it because I'm going to read to you today. So before we get fully into it, it's been a minute since we did the last heart to heart, so I wanted to just give you like a general update. If you're not really here for that, you could just move through, because for once I'm actually putting chapters on this video because I anticipate it being a little bit longer than normal, and I want you to be able to actually use it for whatever you need it for. So where have I been? I've been here in my apartment. And I mean, I've been doing like what I normally do: gym, apartment, teach my class once a week, you know, whatever. And what I've really been trying to do is just organize how I'm doing my content. So obviously, heart to hearts this is the heartbeat of the channel, and I love them honestly the most. But there's other content that I know is important to do because, and this is the point that I really wanted to make. So you know how I'm always saying we're documenting the process of going from zero to hero, but I never talk about like what the zero to hero is. And some of you might know already, but some of you might have no idea. Basically, just real quick, I am transitioning from being a fitness professional to a full-time content creator. So I'm going from zero to hero in the content creation world, YouTube being my main platform. So that being said, these heart to hearts are great because they're really and truly divinely inspired, but you know, there's other things that just make sense to do given the point that I'm at, right, where we're trying to grow. So speaking of which, monetize in March. So yeah, so that's kind of why I took a little bit of a break, because I was like, all right, my heart to hearts are really important, but like the other content is pretty important too. So I've just been trying to figure out like, okay, how do I want to schedule it, and how am I going to organize my time to be producing my heart to hearts on a regular basis so that we could check in with each other, but then also be producing my other content. So yeah, like right now I got vlogs from February that still need to upload. Actually, I should be dropping a gym vlog this weekend. It was supposed to go up tomorrow, but I'm here filming this because God was like, girl, if you don't get off this computer and stop editing. Anyway, we'll get into that. So that's pretty much where I've been, just trying to organize those things. And then also there are a few other things that are more like admin work in terms of just finding work as a talent that I need to be organizing, and I have not, and that's the plan tomorrow, and we'll talk about that later. So that's where I've been. All right, so real quick, oh, wrong notebook, mad notebooks. I got 2 notebooks, everything. Okay. So I'm going to point to, this is like so foreign for me, but listen, we gotta do what we gotta do. All right, so how did I even end up here? The plan was not, you already know, we always have plans and God be like, that's cute. But the plan really wasn't to do a heart to heart today. The plan was actually to finish editing that gym vlog so that I could drop it. that was nixed because I came back from the gym and my dad called me and was kind of, he wasn't freaking out. My dad's a pretty even keel type of dude, but like he called me and was like, hey, so like, what's up with the whole being served thing? And like, what are you gonna do? And really the biggest question he asked was like, what's your plan? What are you gonna, like, how are you gonna do this? And I was like, I don't really have an answer to your question. Because when somebody asks you what's your plan, typically they're asking in a worldly sense, right? And it always comes back to deciding between like having the worldly reaction to worldly pressure, or looking at worldly pressure and saying, okay, this is where God shows up, right? And so, not to say that my dad doesn't get that, but my dad is also extremely practical. And so again, when you get to that final hour, it's very easy to be like, oh, I'm about to go right into the worldly way of reacting to this, right? And yeah, how can I put it? I'm not doing this randomly. Like, I'm not just here like, oh my God, it would be so cool to be a content creator. It would be so cool to be a YouTuber. It's like, this has been put on me for years. This is year 2023. This is year 6. And actually it started before that, but 2017, again, I think you know this by now. I had that dream. It was very specific. And then this year the dreams started coming back again, and they were very like, I don't know if I want to say intense, but they were very specific. And this is what I was told to do. We'll get into a story about how dreams have actually told me to do other things and helped me get out of situations similar to this. Not to this level. This is a new level. Okay, God is trying to grow the faith. So anyway, when my dad asked my plan, I was like, it's to do exactly what I've been doing. Like, I'm not about to switch the plan. You know what I'm saying? There are some things, like I was saying, some sort of admin tasks that are, how could I say this? They were sort of like recommended by God. Like, hey, look into this, do that, blah, blah, blah. Or like sent to me in ways that I'm like, how did this person even find me, right? Different applications and things like that. So I want to make sure that I'm following up on those things. But I guess I'm telling you this because there's a clear distinction between how I'm moving, right? So yeah, I'm going to do some worldly things like apply to this, apply to that. But it's not because I went out looking for it. They were things that came to me. Speaking of things that came to me, so cool. I talked to my dad and I was like, all right, well, my top priority for today was to finish that gym vlog. So I ate some food and got to editing. Part of why I love like content creation so much and why God was like, no, this is what you need to be doing, is because editing is like the most soothing and calming thing to me. Like, I could be sad, I could be upset, I could be nervous, and I'll be editing and I'll literally forget because I just get so in the zone with it. But today, it was difficult. Like, sometimes I'd be in the zone, but then like I'd be so easily distracted, just kind of stressed, just because I feel like when my parents are stressed, I kind of take that on and I'm like, oh my gosh, if they're stressed, then like, so I found myself coming in and out. And there were points when I was editing where I felt like I should be actually filming this heart to heart, right? Just because this was one of the moments that made sense to share, right? And this is kind of like, these are the things that God wanted me to share most. So, but I was like, nah, girl, stay focused. Like, we edited this gym vlog, whatever. It just wasn't really happening. So, in typical millennial fashion, I decided to nervous scroll on Instagram. So I'm scrolling, and then I come across this post, right? So remember that detail because I'm gonna do a little aside. Remember when I was like, okay, like we need to be praying incessantly, whatever. Have you been praying? Let me know in the comments. I wanna make sure that we on the same page. I'm not gonna lie, mine hasn't been that great. But I can definitely say that it's been much better, like ever since realizing and getting that message that we need to be praying incessantly right now, just like based on where we're at in this journey. I notice every day, there's not a day that goes by without me thinking like, okay, let me spend some time just chatting God up. Like just, you know what I'm saying? And Here's why that's important. Remember, I said it opens up channels of communication, right? So interestingly enough, a lot of things have just kind of been getting thrown at me today, thrown my way. But one of the most significant ones was this post that I came across. So I wanted to actually share it with you. We got so many tools today. We got the phone. I wanted to actually share it with you. I saved it. Sometimes what I do is I send myself things in text message on my phone, and I would have sent it to you on Instagram, but I don't have your Instagram. So actually, yeah, throw your Instagram down there. Or if you want to find me on Instagram, it's Janine St. G, so I can send you stuff. Anyway, all right, so let's go through the post. I'm gonna try to play it. I wanna play it and I want you to be able to hear. So give me a second because I gotta change up my camera settings. Okay. All right, here it is.
The Lord told me to read Mark chapter 8. I have been in constant communication to the Lord about something very specific, kind of really asking him to show up in this way. The thing that highlighted off the page to me was the feeding of the 4,000. And he said, Deanna, you're not stewarding the miracle. I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, when I do a miracle, it's not just for you in that moment. It's for you in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. You're not reflecting on what I did in that moment for you. He said, otherwise, you wouldn't be praying the way that you're praying right now. You're spending all this time and energy praying for something that you've already seen me do. He said, it's no different than the disciples. They came to me and asked me, how do we feed people with bread, but we're in the wilderness? And he said, I had just done the feeding of the 5,000. I want to take you to new levels of faith, where you stop asking if I can do something and you start declaring what I have done. The way that you can steward it is by reflecting on it. I want to take you higher to face new giants and develop your faith in a way where you haven't seen me do the things that you're asking me to do before. Write down the miracles. You can tell that your faith is increasing by the way that you pray. If you're still praying for basic level things that you've already seen me do before, that's where your faith will remain. Later in the scripture, he kind of challenges the disciples. He says, do you not see it? He said, I've already fed the 5,000. Why are you asking how we can feed 4,000? I wonder what would have happened if the disciples didn't ask him. If they would have just reflected and said, he fed the 5,000. I know he can feed 4. So what if they rallied together and just started making things happen? What if they broke the bread and started passing it around instead of Jesus having to do it again?
All right, so shout out to Dahter, and I guess her name is actually Deanna. I never knew that. Anyway, I don't know if she has a YouTube, but if she does, shout out to her. She definitely has an Instagram, so follow her if you felt like that resonated. Anyway, there were some really important points that she made, and this is where the activity piece comes in. Here are the key things that I think were really important in what she said. And as soon as I seen it, I guess. As soon as I seen it, I had, wow, grammar is really difficult sometimes. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh nah, like I need to stop everything and do this right now, because another thing that I know I've been needing to do is like just scripting, which is basically like writing out what I want, but writing it as if it's happened or happening right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, if I want to see supernatural growth of my YouTube, then I would write something like, I'm so grateful that I'm seeing this supernatural growth in my YouTube because I'm able to connect with so many of my family members, and family members being you, not like my blood family or whatever. Yeah, anyway, I've been wanting to do that, like writing out affirmations, like all that kind of stuff. And I just haven't made the time for it because I've just been like, I want to edit. So when I saw this, I was like, no, I need to stop and do this, because this activity is similar to those types of things. So when people talk about like manifestation and things like that, all of these things are related. I think sometimes people think that this is that and that's that, and they're like on two very different sides of the coin, when really they're all the same thing. Like all of those things are ways in which humans are trying to tap into the divine aspect of themselves, of our existence, all of that, right? AKA God. So things that were important. One, she talked about Mark chapter 8. So we're going to read that together. So if you want to grab a Bible, you can. If you're not even familiar with the Bible, don't worry. I'm not someone I have never read the whole Bible. So don't feel like, again, this is not like your typical, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's a whole other thing. I'm not even getting into that right now, but grab your Bible if you want, or you can just listen to me. The other thing that was really important was she talked about reflecting on the things God has done so far, right? Because a lot of times we get to these points and we're like, oh my God, how am I gonna make it? And you're forgetting that like the only reason you're here right now is because God got you through whatever and you made it to here. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that was really important. And that's part of the activity that we're going to do. And then obviously I have some stories for you, just because I think a lot of times, sometimes it's hard to believe for miracles if you've never seen them done in like supernatural ways. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think sometimes people chalk things up to, oh, it just worked out. You know what I'm saying? Because the way that it worked out was a possibility that they could fathom in their minds, right? But it's usually the possibilities that you could never fathom in your mind that feel the most supernatural. And I think I've had a lot of those experiences. So I want to share them with you just so that you know, like, nah, this stuff really be happening if you've never had that experience. Okay, so let's get into Mark chapter 8. Let me tell you something. When I went to get my Bible, I keep it on this little ledge. It was like stuck to the ledge because I don't think I've opened this thing probably for like a year, maybe longer. Anyway, I think I bookmarked it. Yes. Okay. Mark chapter 8. I'm reading from the New King James Version, if that matters to you. Feeding the 4,000. In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from afar. Then his disciples answered him, how can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? He asked them, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks. You know what's so interesting? I'm just pausing real quick. When I was deciding how I wanted to set up for this video, I was like, oh, I want to sit on the ground. So that's just interesting that this came up. My thought was like, I hadn't read this yet. I'm reading it for the first time with you. But my thought was just to feel more grounded, right? Because I've been feeling a little jumpy. All right, so he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks, broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before them, and they set them before the multitude. They also had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said to set them also before them. So they ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments. Now those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away, immediately got into the boat with his disciples, and came to the region of Dalmanutha. Okay, so second section, the Pharisees seek a sign. Then the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing him. But he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly, I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation. Okay, next section, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Herod. And he left them, and getting into the boat again, departed to the other side. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than 1 loaf with them in the boat. Then he charged them, saying, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have no bread. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments did you take up? They said to him, 12. Also, when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up? And they said, 7. So he said to them, how is it you do not understand? A blind man healed at Bethsaida. Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up. And he was restored and saw everyone clearly. Then he sent him away to his house, saying, neither go into the town nor tell anyone in the town. Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ. Now Jesus and his disciples went out to the towns of Caesarea Philippi. And on the road, he asked his disciples, saying to them, who do men say that I am?" So they said, "John the Baptist, but some say Elijah, and others one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered and said to him, "You are the Christ." Then he strictly warned them that they should tell no one about him. Jesus predicts his death and resurrection. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke this word openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when he had turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." I keep looking up at like points that are important. Okay, this is the last section that we're done with the reading. "Take up the cross and follow him. When he had called the people to himself with his disciples also, he said to them, 'Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in the adulterous and sinful generation, of him, the Son of Man, also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels.'" There's tons to unpack here. I basically wanted to read that to you because there's times, when you open the Bible, like I said, there are things that will just resonate and they'll come from anywhere. The message can come in any form. It could come from the Bible, it could come from your friend, it could come from Instagram, it could come from anywhere. It could come from this video, right? So that's why I wanted to read it, but also there were some really specific points in here, and I think I'm gonna focus on just the demonstrations of feeding thousands of people with food that looks like it's only fit for like a family of 7. Right? That's important because a lot of times, like, again, we're in the final hour. We're like, "Lord, I ain't got nothing to pay this rent." And God is like, "Nah, there's enough." You know what I'm saying? So even if you have $1, there's some way that God's going to stretch that dollar and, you're going to be able to do whatever you need to do, right? That's the significance of that. In that, like, we don't have to rely on, like, the natural things because God will do a thing to make whatever natural thing that we need expand or what, because usually it's like we usually need more of things so that we can get by in the natural world, right? Okay. Part 2 is when he basically reminds them, right? Because they come across basically a similar situation again, right? Where they're like, "How are we gonna do this?" And God is like, wasn't it y'all that was with me when I fed 5,000 people or fed 4,000 people, right? That's what Dahter was talking about too. And then she made the good point of remembering what God has done and reflecting on those things. And it goes back to the whole praying incessantly, right? A lot of times we pray as if we've never seen something great happen. And again, for some of us, that might actually be the case. But for those of us that have seen like supernatural works, then those are the things you want to hold on to. So the next part of our activity is we're going to grab a notebook, we're going to grab a pen, and we're going to just start listing out the things that God has done that, like, it doesn't have to be exhaustive, but honestly, I say, like, take as much time as you want with it. We'll do some of it together. I'm going to do it with you. So I don't know. I'll put like a timer for 5 minutes. Let's do it for 5 minutes. And obviously you can make it longer if you want, but I'm just gonna do it for 5 minutes for the sake of the video. So you can pause it. Let's say like the 5 minutes is up and you're like, wait, I still need more time because I'm just flowing right now. Then do that. This isn't jail. Like, you use it how you want. And if you want to fast forward through this part because you're not gonna do it right now, do that. Okay, 5 minutes. Can you see that? It's set and go. I'm gonna back up so you can see me writing my stuffs. All right, we have a couple of seconds left, so yeah, I think I'm actually gonna stop because I was coming up with a few different things. You can keep writing though if you're writing. Got like 20 seconds. I came up with a lot of different things, but anyway, I'll explain in 15 seconds. Okay, time is up. All right, so like I was saying, I wrote down a lot of different things. Let's get closer. I like being close to you. Yeah, so I wrote down a lot of different things, but because right now, the situation that I'm in is specific to like housing, rent, shelter, all that stuff. I wanted to focus on those stories, and there's actually so many, like a lot of these are those. And writing this down is actually good because these are giving me topics for other heart to hearts, just because, like I said, I think that we don't always hear really crazy testimonies that just don't make sense. You know what I'm saying? And those are the most important ones, I think, because they help in the growth of our faith, because that's really, anytime you're in one of these like final hour situations, it's because your growth is going to the next level. And usually when your growth goes to the next level, it's because like you're going to a whole other level too. Okay. And like by other level, I mean like you're ascending in life, in whatever it is that you're doing. So, okay. The first one, let me see. Let me make sure I'm on task. So this apartment in general is a whole story. Sorry, I'm still struggling to look in the lens. But I don't think that's like a story for another day. I'll probably talk about it generally, but I do have to give you the full story of how I even ended up in this apartment, first of all. But I wanted to talk about a few stories. So in 2017, I came back to New York, and I think you may or may not have known this already, but I was actually in grad school 2014 to 2015 at NYU in a nutrition and dietetics program. I took a leave of absence, started focusing on just building my social media platforms and all that. But I really wanted to be back in New York. I just had no idea how to be in New York without being in school. Because before NYU, I matriculated to Columbia out of high school. So undergrad, I started there, but I ended up transferring home. Anyway, story for another day. But yeah, I had no idea how anyone could live in New York without like a corporate job, and I knew that wasn't my path. So long story short, the summer of 2017, I felt just called. Literally a friend actually came to me and was like, "What are you doing here? You need to be in New York." And I was like, "I know, but how?" And she was like, "Girl, just go." So that summer my brother had an internship in New York City because he was in business school. So it was like between first and second year where they do their internship and then they go back second year and finish and they get their MBA. So anyway, he was like, yo, yeah, come crash. Like, she's right. Cool. Tons of crazy things happened. But the craziest thing that happened was I got to the end of his sublet lease or whatever, sublet agreement. He actually had left, but there was a week because he was going on a trip and then he was going to come back to go to school, right? But he was done in New York basically, and there was one more week left. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to New York. I'm gonna keep working on my social media, which actually it grew, like it took off that summer. And then I was like, okay, and then I'm gonna like try to secure a job, or like something's just gonna happen where I'll be able to stay here, you know, and just find my way. Well, my social media definitely grew, but I didn't secure anything. I didn't have a job. Like, I didn't have clients. I didn't know how to get clients. I was very like, wow, this is overwhelming, right? So in my mind, I was like, well, I guess worst case scenario, I'll go home, but I told myself I was gonna stay in that apartment until the final hour, right? Like literally to the last day of the sublet lease. And that's what I did. So a few days before, I think I had gone to some fete with one of my like closest friends, Brittany, and Brittany for the longest had been like telling me like I belong in New York and all that, and I'm like, I know, but so she came to me and she was like, hey, like we should talk. And I was like, yeah, what's up? And she was like, yeah, like what are you thinking about like doing with regards, you know, I know the sublet lease is done, Ben is gone, like what are you gonna do? And I was like, honestly, I have no idea. Like, I'm just staying until the last day. And then, you know, if there's no option really, I'm gonna just go back home. And she was like, yeah, that's what I want to talk to you about. Actually, I don't think you should go home and you're gonna stay with me. And she was like, mind you, she lived in a 1-bedroom. She's like, you're gonna stay with me. We're gonna figure it out. Don't even worry about it. But she was like, it just doesn't make sense because like you've come so far, like so much has happened. And I just think that if you could stay, it will continue in that way. And I was like, do I have a place to live in New York right now? So yeah, it might seem small, but it's just to say like the friend that I told you about that came to me, right? Before I decided to just hop in a rental and like just put a few things in trash bags and come back to New York. That friend that was Shalonda, she was like, listen, like you don't even have to worry about that. I'm sure people will literally want you to live with them just so that they can have you as like a example of healthy living, so that they can like learn just from watching you, just from having you in the space. And I was like, what? And the idea of couch surfing was so uncomfortable to me. I was like, oh, I can't be on nobody's couch. Like, that's crazy. You know what I'm saying? And then lo and behold, like, I think the key was that I never even asked. Like, someone came to me. And so that's, again, like, remember how I was saying, like, God can come to you in different ways, right? That was God working through her. Like, yeah, I'm sure she would just, you know, be down to let me stay for a little bit. But, like, I was with her for a year. And a lot of things happened. And obviously, I was able to, like, come out of that and, like, finally get my own place and all of that. I couch surfed a little bit more, though, because Heather, that's like another one of my like angels on earth, basically took me in after the year and was like, okay, you probably feel, you know, because after a while you in somebody's space, it just starts to get like they deserve to have their space, right? And so she was like, nah, you come in with me. And that, again, I didn't ask her anything. She was just like, yeah, get your stuff, you're coming with me. And yeah, we'll go into that another time, because now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, dang, a lot of things came out of like that whole thing. So anyway, that's one of them. Again, it was a very final hour thing. So a lot of times we're like, oh my gosh, when is it gonna happen? When is it gonna happen? And like, there's still more time for God to work. So just never forget that. Now, let's get into just some things specific to this apartment itself, okay? So first of all, me moving here was like, it was a whole thing, right? Even when I was gonna move here, my parents were like, oh my God, what are you doing? This is crazy. How are you gonna pay for it? And remember, at the time I was doing that high ticket fitness coach. I was like, yo, I'm making racks. I was doing mad well in my program because I had a coach and everything, like, who was helping me with it. I was like, I ain't got no issues. But I was a little bit nervous though, because I had only been doing high ticket fitness coaching for maybe like 3 or 4-ish months, right? But something just told me, first of all, when I came here, I just had certain feelings. Like my intuition was like, yeah, you live here. And I was like, but that's a story for another day. But the point is, I knew that I was supposed to live here, even though I had no idea how it was all gonna like work out. But my parents were really nervous because in the worldly sense, it just didn't make sense to them, right? Like they were like, how is this happening? And it wasn't a matter of them not believing in me. It was just literally like their faith wasn't designed for this experience. Like this experience was designed for my faith in the path of my faith, the path of my faith. Yeah. Or for my path. You know what I'm trying to say. And up until now, it's pretty much worked out. Actually, there's so many other things I didn't write down. Anyway, I'm gonna tell you 2 more stories. All right, so when I first moved in here, they were giving a lot of concessions because it was in pandemic time, which again, even that, the timing was like on point, everything, right? That's why it's really important to just take comfort in the things that you've seen done before, or take comfort in like stories like these that help you really see like, all right, I'm good. So cool. Mad concessions. When I first moved in, I didn't have to pay for the first 3 months. I was like, bet I'm about to rack up on clients and then I'm gonna be good. It was a struggle. Like I did get some clients, but it was a struggle. And like, I was just getting by. Cause remember, I was already starting to feel like, this is not exactly what I want to do. So I was like doing like my little shortcut marketing to get clients. Literally, like I was doing it just to get by and keep me going as I was gonna start figuring out like, okay, how do I get into the content creation? Cause I could just feel God was calling me for YouTube. So January came, I hadn't paid January. No, that's not true. I did pay January, but I had no idea how I was gonna pay February. And I think it was like January 29th or something. I had a call with a client, with a potential client. And the way that she came to me was so interesting. Wasn't at all my typical client, like typical client profile demographic. Like she just didn't fit at all. But the way she came to me was very interesting. And the way she found me, she felt was very like supernatural too, right? So anyway, I didn't even know if I would close her. This one wasn't even working at the time, I don't think. I closed her and was able to pay February rent. But it's interesting because I remember that month of January being like so nervous, right? Because it was my first time really having to figure out like how I was gonna pay the next month, right? And I remember one night waking up in the middle of the night and praying and being like, listen, God, you told me to come here, so you're gonna figure out how to pay this. So I'm not gonna worry about it, period. And then that is what actually happened. Another story, right? Okay, so continuing in this same year, this was 2021. So now rent was due for March. Okay. After this, things started to like even out. So, but the first few months I was like, what am I doing? So cool. February, I was like, yo, I don't know what's about to happen, how I'm gonna pay this rent, but I had a dream. So remember I was doing this little shortcut marketing or whatever. So basically what I used to do for any high ticket coaches out there, I used to use LinkedIn in a very specific way where I would search groups from the schools that I had gone to. And thank God that I went to these super fancy schools that I feel like I didn't really use them for like life. Cause I feel like the schools that I went to, it like creates a certain pedigree. So on paper, you can like really move in the corporate world, right? But I didn't use it for that. However, it was helpful in my life in some way because I had a dream, and basically in the dream, I was searching in the Milton group. So I went to Milton Academy for high school. And I had been avoiding that group. I was searching in the Wellesley group because that's where I transferred to. I was searching in the Columbia group. I was in NYU, but I refused to go in the Milton group just because Milton was like a very tight-knit community. And I was just like, I just don't want these people like knowing like what's going on with my life, what I'm doing and stuff. Cause like, I don't know, not that I was ashamed, but like, I just knew that I was so different from like most of my peers who like really went into the corporate world or, and like, we're killing it. Not just like oh, I work at some random place 9 to 5 or whatever, and I have a salary and a 401k, but like literally like running the biggest companies that we know of, like Google phenoms, like, you know what I'm saying, KKR, like, you might not even know these names, but if you know these names, you know what I'm talking about, right? So I was like, yeah, I don't want these people to know what I'm doing, like all of my business. But the dream, so I woke up, I remember waking up for the dream, and I'm like, God, you really want me to go in the Milton group? And what came back was like, do you want to pay this rent or not? And I was like, heard you. So I went in the Milton group, I was searching or whatever. I was like, hopefully something bites. I don't know why I was told to do this, but I'm just gonna do it. And I think maybe the week after, someone responded to one of my like outreach messages. So we got on a call. Mind you, it was the same exact situation. I think it was actually March 1st. So rent was due already, right? Like February was done. It was literally March 1st. We were on a call. And to this day, that was my biggest sale to date. And I was able to, I basically made enough to pay for a month and like most of like probably 90% of the next month. So, yeah, that was insane. But again, it was in the final hour, like literally rent was due March 1st. So yeah, I'm trying to think. Oh, okay. Last story. And then I'm just gonna like sum up a few things. So before I moved to this apartment, I lived in my first apartment after couch surfing, right? I used to live in East Harlem. Yeah, uptown. I used to live in East Harlem. But I didn't know that the building that I was living in, that the landlord was a slumlord, right? I had no idea. I was always on time with my rent. It was relatively reasonable. So, you know, it was whatever. But then right before the pandemic, and actually way before that, it was like months before, I was having issues with my smoke alarm, like the fire alarm. It was always beeping. And there was no way I could fix it because it was like issued by the city, I think. And it was one of those things where the city would have to come and replace it. And I don't know if it was a battery issue or what, but like you literally couldn't get into it to change anything. So the thing was beeping. I would be calling all the time, like, yo, y'all gotta come fix this, calling the super, and nobody ever helped me. So I just lived with the beeping all the time, to the point where I think I kind of like didn't even notice that it was happening. So that's some like serious hood living, but hey, so cool. Fast forward, it's the month before the pandemic. So February 2020. And I was like, you know what? I'm not paying these people this month. And I could have paid them. It's not like I didn't have it to pay. I was just like, no, I'm not paying them because they need to come and fix this beeping. This is crazy. It's been happening for like more than 6 months at this point. So cool. Next thing you know, pandemic hit. I'm like, oh shoot. So there was a point where in March, actually early March, where I was like, no, I think it was April. I was like, shoot, whatever. I think it was March. And I was like, dang, should I pay this rent? And something was like, no, don't pay it. And I was like, okay. And then the next month came and I got nervous again, like, oh my God, should I be paying this rent? And it was like, no, don't pay it. And at the time I was like heavy in my Bible, like really following it, like just, you know what I'm saying? I've never really been a very religious person, but like, I just always do whatever I need to do to like maintain my connection with God, right? Like that direct connection with God. So anyway, at that time, it was like, I was really like focused on the Bible. So cool. And I know every time I was like really nervous about the rent situation, wherever I was in the Bible would always like be a word that was almost speaking like, stop worrying about this rent. Like, why are you worried about something I told you not to do? Like, you good. Like, I got you. Anyway, fast forward, okay, through most of the pandemic. Mind you, at that time I was caking because that was the early days of my fitness coaching and I was really doing it to the T. So I could have paid that rent easy and like for years. But anyway, for whatever reason, it was saying not to pay. So one day I see like, there was like a week where I was seeing roaches, not a lot, but like 1 or 2. And I was like, what's going on in here? So I would spray it down myself with like Raid or whatever, but I was used to the exterminators coming, but I hadn't seen an exterminator. And I'm confused, like, is it because I haven't been paying rent? Like, so I called the super and I'm like, hey, what's going on? I'm seeing roaches. Like, I haven't seen the exterminator. And he was like, yeah, so the exterminator is not coming anymore because the landlord is not paying them. I was like, okay, well, can you give me their number? Because I'll pay them for my unit alone. And he was like, oh, I can try to find it. He was like, but also just so you know, like, they're also not paying the mortgage. The landlord wasn't paying the mortgage. He was like, they stopped paying the mortgage. And he was like, yeah, so I think, you know, if you can, he's like, a lot of people have actually left the building already. I'm actually surprised you're still here. He was like, so if you can find a way to like leave and get out of here, that's probably a good idea. Just because he was like, I also feel like the foundation of this building is like built on faulty ground and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wait. So all this time I'm stressing like, oh my God, like I'm supposed to be paying this rent. Like, should I be paying this rent? But God said not to pay the rent. And all this time, the landlord wasn't paying the mortgage. So meaning like the landlord basically wasn't even in ownership of this building anymore. And like in court, it would have just been like thrown out. And it was crazy because my intuition was really telling me, and everything that I was reading, everything that was coming across, anytime I would ask and pray and ask, like the answer was like, can you just chill? Like I said, don't. I'm not saying that's what's happening right now. I'm just saying that sometimes these things just don't make sense in a worldly way, right? Like worldly logic just doesn't apply to a lot of the situations that we can find ourselves in. So I guess that's the story of how I got free rent in New York. I'm saying all this to say, you know, it's definitely been challenging ever since I've been like transitioning little by little and then like fully into content creation, just because it was just something I had never done, right? Like as a career, like in a way to really be making money. You know what I mean? It was kind of like something that I was doing that I really loved, that was a hobby, but I also knew that I was supposed to be doing more with it. All this to say that even in those times, like the early parts of this transition into full-time content creation, a lot of things would come through. Like last year I got a grant for this program that I did with Google. It was for Black creators. I also got work that I didn't know they were even gonna pay me this much. So like a lot of my rent had been covered in those early periods of like moving into content creation. But part of why I'm like doing this YouTube right now is because, yeah, like maybe 2 or so months ago, I had a dream where it was like, I had posted a video and it got like 21K views or something. I was like, what? At the time, I only had 270 subscribers. Like, how the heck? So I knew that God was like, hello, part of the reason why you're having this issue is because you're not doing exactly what I said. So yeah. My dad asked me what the plan is. If you're wondering what the plan is, it's to just keep continuing. And just letting the time like line up, letting it all play out, remembering all the times that God really has held me down in this journey. And I know you're probably wondering like, why wouldn't you just like go get a job or go get this or go get that, right? And part of the reason is because one, it's just like the way that I am. When I'm doing something, I'm very focused and zeroed in on that thing. And I'm not the type of person that's like, oh, I'm gonna let myself be pulled here, pulled there, pulled here, pulled there, right? And so what ends up happening is usually when I get jobs like just for money, the focus just becomes the job. And so there's no energy left for what I know God really wants me to be doing, right? And, you know, it's because I put all of myself into like whatever I do. So I'm believing, I'm knowing that putting all of myself into what God told me to do is the plan to follow to come out of this situation. So yes. The last thing that I was gonna say, sorry if my energy feels kind of low, it's because I'm like thinking, talking, I'm also like grounding. But I wanted to come and talk to you. So here we are, let's look at the notes, see where we're at. All right, so we talked about, oh, I wanted to pray with you. I think we should pray together. It's gonna be a very quick prayer. I kind of wrote it out already, but we talked about all the miracles that God has done so far. yeah, so I want you to really look at your list and take it in and really like remember it. Because the thing is, the outside world is gonna try to like make you feel like what you're thinking or what you're feeling or what you know isn't making sense, right? Because it's not following worldly logic. That's why it's so important to be praying all the time and to be really remembering what God has done so far. And like, again, if you have never seen like those supernatural acts, just come back to this video. Like, hit me up. You want to go deep into these stories? We can go deep. But yeah. So I want to leave you with two things. We're gonna pray, but before we pray, I guess I already talked about it. Basically, I was just gonna say that like there are some things that I'm gonna do. I don't want you thinking that like I'm gonna just be here like editing. That is mainly what I'm gonna do, but there are certain things that like I know weren't random, that really God sent for me to like apply to these things, so that I could have greater opportunities and so that God could show up through those things, because they're all supposed to be working together.
Okay, so let's pray.
There was something that Dahter said. She was like, you could be praying, the way that you pray shows your level of faith in what God can do and what God has done, right? And the has done is the most important part. She said something, she said, declare what I have done, right? And that's where you're supposed to take rest in. You're supposed to take rest in what God has already done. So here's the prayer. It's actually going to be like a template for a prayer, and you can fill it in with your own stuff. But basically what I wrote was, God, you have done XYZ, right? All the works that we wrote down. So I know that I'm good. The next part is saying thank you. So thank you for all of the things that you've done, and thank you for what you're doing right now, right? So it's a different way to pray, because it's not like, oh God, can you please make sure? It's like, why are you acting like you ain't seen it before, right? I think that's the main point. So I'm always praying for you. I know you're always praying for me. Like, some of y'all really be writing me messages. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't expect that from this. Because I always feel like I'm supposed to be the one bringing the whatever, like bringing the information or bringing the teaching or bringing the story or whatever it is. I never think that like someone's going to bring me something. Yeah, we need to talk about that in therapy. So that's all I got. Today was a little bit long, but thank you for being here with me. It just means the world. And I'm excited to get back to like more regular heart-to-hearts, but I just thought this one was really important. And I felt like I knew that I was supposed to record this today. So,
Okay, I love you.
oh, and the last thing that I wanted to say is just remember, because again, when you're in the final hour, staying focused in what God has already done can tend to be a little bit difficult, just because you're in that final hour. So the pressure of the world is just intense, right? And it's going to get more and more intense as you get closer to like that end deadline or the period where it's over, right? But I just want you to remember that like God's time is very different from the time that we experience. So there's so many scenarios where it can work out that you wouldn't even realize that it could work out. The deadline that you're thinking might not even be the deadline for real. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, let's say, okay, whatever, in my case, rent is due April 1st, but maybe I really have until July XYZ, right? And God's gonna do something in June that like completely erases everything and then like sets me up to be good for the rest of the year, right? So there's, and then there's other things that are possible that I can't even think of. I'm not like, I don't even think at that order to be able to like fathom it, right? So just remember that. And a lot of times it will feel as if God is waiting till the last second. And part of that is because then we have stories to share to help someone else that's going to be in a situation like that, that's never seen as a supernatural type of miracle. So yeah. Okay, I'm really gonna go for real this time.